Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Artellectuals podcast. Today we have Jerry Jean. He's an award-winning songwriter, producer, and musician. He is the founder of Vocal Artist House, which is a dynamic music production studio in Harlem. At the studio, Jerry creates recordings and collaborates with world-class engineers and musicians. He also offers vocal coaching and music production. Jerry has independently garnered over 3 million plays for his music among the major digital platforms. Jerry can be found at jerryjean.com. His studio is vocalartisthouse.com, and his social media handle is at jerryjeanmusic across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find his original music and newly released single named Liberated on his Spotify and YouTube channel when you search for Jerry Jean. Now, if you have a brief moment, I would greatly appreciate it if you can click the like and subscribe buttons if you're watching this episode on YouTube. If you're watching on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. This will help us so much. Thank you. Now, please enjoy today's episode with Jerry Jean. Well, thank you, Jerry, for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'd like to get to know more about what you currently do. We met a long time ago, actually. So we met like around 5-6 years ago, and you helped me with a video project, audio project as well. So yeah, get to know a little bit more about what you currently do.
Sure. So I write, produce, and release music as an independent artist, and I run a studio called Vocal Artist House, where I work with singer-songwriters and theater actors and people who simply want to learn to sing to feed their souls. And the other half of the business is music production. So I work with different artists producing their projects, recording them, and runs the gamut from singer-songwriters to some commercial work and some film scoring as well. But my biggest project right now, I have to say, is trying to balance that with 2 young children. That is the challenge.
Right, we met when you had 1 child, now you have 2, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
And during this pandemic, you're having even more time with them, I'm sure.
Right, because there's no school. So the goal is to keep them from killing themselves.
Absolutely. Well, how do you make sure that they're, if you're recording something, how do you ensure that there's no screaming or yelling?
Sure. So my wife and I actually have a pretty good system right now. She's an attorney, and she's working from home at the moment in my music studio. And she's usually starting her day around 6 a.m. and finishes by 3. So I do everything after that. And the studio has a double door that seals out the sound. She's really gracious to take the kids outside to the park if I have recording to do. But if a little sound bleeds in, it's not a big deal unless it's like a really sensitive project, because the sound isolation is pretty good.
Perfect. Yeah, you have like a legit studio with a double door and everything, so that's awesome.
Double door is the benchmark, right, for legit studio.
Right. You have I see all of these soundproofing squares and everything.
Oh yeah, the sound panels are to keep the reverberations in the room controlled. You can always add reverb in the studio, but it's very hard to take away reverberations from your source. So we try to keep the sound nice and crisp and clean to begin with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be great to learn a little more about the projects you're currently doing and who you've collaborated with, and what are some of the highlights that you've experienced over the past few years.
Sure. Well, I definitely view my clients, whether I'm working with them in a vocal coaching capacity or whether I'm producing, as collaborators, because we're working towards a common goal. Last year, Crystal Joy Brown, who is a longtime client who I've worked with off and on for about 10 years, booked the leading role of Eliza in Hamilton on Broadway, and that was huge. Prior to that, she was Diana Ross in Motown, and it's really gratifying to see her achieve these big things, after pounding the pavement for so long. James Harkness, he booked the leading role of Paul in Ain't Too Proud, and the cast album was nominated for a Grammy Award. Who else? Malin Jarman. So she moved to New York City about 9 years ago, and I was one of her first music directors here. And when We did some early shows together. Fast forward 9 years, and she wins The Voice, which just blows my mind. In terms of my producing and recording projects, the most memorable probably is when I invited Geechee Dan, who is an 80-year-old Subway singer, over to my place to properly record him. This guy is a dead ringer for Otis Redding, and if his life had, gone a different way, he would have been just as big. He didn't have any professional recordings, so I recorded him at my place with good audio, singing "I've Been Loving You Too Long," the classic Otis Redding song, and we put it out. And I also interviewed him and put that interview on YouTube, and I feel so lucky that I was able to preserve some of that history. Outside of producing, some of my favorite projects as a freelance musician include playing strings for Florence and the Machine. Got to play on her live album. We did Jimmy Fallon and MTV Unplugged. And, oddly enough, playing strings has got me to some interesting places. I got to play backing strings for Boyz II Men, which is a surreal full circle moment because I used to listen to them and jam out to their music as a kid. I got to play strings for multiple gospel concerts at Carnegie Hall, and that never gets old. But for all these kind of highlight projects, there are many more projects that are more under the radar and more artisanal. They might not have the name recognition, but I'm so glad that they exist and grateful to have worked on them.
That's great. So you used to do predominantly, like, you played violin and piano, so you were part of tracks for those, and now you're more on the production side of things.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
awesome.
They kind of inform each other, and often I'll be playing those string tracks or piano tracks on other people's records, and definitely on my own projects. Although I have to say it's actually a lot easier sometimes to just hire a violinist who just plays violin to lay everything down and to try to do it myself. Even though I am a violinist, he can be much more efficient with time instead of recording a track and then pressing stop and having to be the engineer and the artist at the same time.
I'm sure, yeah. Wearing many hats is not always the best idea, so totally understand. So is it mostly word of mouth that you've been getting this production work?
Yeah, most of it is word of mouth. I do have a website, a personal website and a business website. A Vocal Artist House is my studio, and jerryjean.com is my my artist site. I find that most work comes just from people who like something that I've done in the past, or have seen something that I've done on YouTube, and they reach out. I mean, YouTube has actually been a really great resource for meeting new people to work with and for people to kind of find out what I do.
And do you hire outside for video work, or you tend to work with people you've known for the past few years?
Sometimes I film things myself. The better video work is when I hire somebody who focuses just on video. My personal music videos, the official ones, were generally shot on really nice cameras, like the last two were shot on the Red. For performance videos, I've used mirrorless and DSLR cameras. And then the more kind of Instagram type stuff, I just shoot myself with my cell phone.
That's awesome. And how do you go about finding talent for, like, let's say you mentioned violinists? Are these people that you've known for years, or do you scout for people?
So when looking for musicians, I'm definitely pulling from a pool of players that I've built a relationship with over the years. We may have gigged together or have common contacts, and someone has put in a good word for someone. Sometimes I'll post a query on my personal Facebook. I also will search through Instagram and YouTube, because these sites are really like the modern day business card to check out their playing. For vocalists, sometimes I've posted in Backstage online. And all these artists are also working on their own music projects, and we try to help each other's projects out. And there's been times when we've bartered, and we generally try to keep rates reasonable and lift each other up.
So during this time, during the coronavirus, have you been getting work for people outside of New York because there are studios everywhere and people have equipment now. Have you been doing projects like that?
I had a new song that came out recently called Liberated, and I wanted to do like a dance challenge. And I reached out to a bunch of dancers that I felt embodied the spirit of the song. And obviously there's no place where we can just all get together and rehearse. So I just asked them to film themselves, kind of create their own reaction to the song from wherever they are. And
Sure.
I got a bunch of those. And they kind of blew me away. There was like a b-boy dancer, a more classically trained dancer, like a handstand expert, just this kind of a wide gamut of artists. And that was all done online. Everyone shot their videos and sent it to me. So that's kind of one of my favorite projects that was done during this quarantine period.
Sure. That's great. I love that idea of just being able to collaborate with dancers. And I did this project a while ago I did a Michael Jackson Paganini, and I was actually taking some hip hop classes during that time, so I was thinking of having a hip hop kind of version of that. But yeah, and also with this podcast, I'm thinking, of also exploring, because predominantly I know musicians, so I'm going to talk now to a chef in a couple weeks and a wine sommelier and all kinds of things. So I love just learning about all these different aspects of art, and I think that's also important to learn from a different perspective. See how your field is viewed from someone else's eyes. So yeah, it'd be great to know a little bit about where it all started. How did music start in your life? Sure.
So I was born in Taipei, Taiwan. Came to the States when I was 1 year old, and my parents moved. Myself, my brother, I have an older brother, James, and my mom to a town called Parsippany, New Jersey. It's a suburb about an hour out of the city. And growing up, music started with lessons, violin lessons from age 4, piano from about 6 or 7. And I took those weekly lessons and was deeply into the classical world, taking classical piano, classical violin. And when I got into maybe about 4th or 5th grade, I took up the drums at school, and I started becoming fascinated with pop music. And that broadened my world. I remember having a big crush on some of the epic singers of the day, the Mariah and Whitney, and wanting to marry them when I grow up. But yeah, that really broadened my world. In high school, I got deeply into jazz piano. I played in the jazz band. Then went to school at NYU for vocal performance. I was an instrumentalist growing up, and in college I just became obsessed with the voice. I wanted to know how it worked, everything about it, the physiology, how to produce all types of different sounds. And I remember going to the library and reading every book I could on vocal pedagogy. Graduated with a degree, BM and MA in vocal performance. And then was just let out onto the streets of New York and started my teaching and freelance life right after that. Got it. And you didn't have any formal vocal training before college? I didn't before college. I sang in choir my junior and senior years of high school, but I never took any voice lessons until college. But when I started taking voice lessons in college, I was obsessed. I played piano for other people's voice lessons at the same time during that whole period, from freshman year all the way to finishing college. About 20 voice lessons a week I accompanied. Wow. So I was kind of on both sides of the table at the same time, taking voice lessons from my teacher in undergrad. And I remember in college, every day from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., I would get out the piano practice room key in my dorm, and I'd go downstairs and just sing until my voice was raspy. And that's kind of my crash course into singing, because, again, like before college, I really didn't take it seriously. So I was just kind of a cycle about it once school started. Yeah, all that catch-up game, I'm sure, was, definitely. Wow, so that's awesome. Cool. And then you were in the freelance world, and were there any, was it rough in the beginning for you? So I was very, very lucky, actually, because right after I graduated, I I got offered a position to teach at NYU. So I was back at NYU, but I was in a different program. I was teaching at the Tisch School of the Arts, and I graduated from Steinhardt, which is where the music program is housed. So I had a base there, teaching music theory and being on staff as a music director and vocal coach. And I also got a job as an adjunct at City College teaching there. So I had kind of these 2 university gigs, which gave me some clout. And then I was just freelancing like crazy. Like I remember the first year I got out of college, and actually even during college, I was gigging so much. Like one night I would be playing at like the Bitter End, and then the next night I'd be playing at Don't Tell Mama, playing a lot in the cabaret scene, music directing for performance artists. I played and conducted a lot of theater. Actually even sang in an opera company. This is really kind of a crazy time of just filling up all my hours with the stuff that you could do in music in New York City. I mean, during the daytime, I was playing auditions, vocal classes, even accompanying ballet classes for well-to-do toddlers in Soho. Yeah, I mean, that was all game. This period was all about building up my client base and trying all different types of things, and I would later prune out a lot of them. But yeah, I wouldn't trade it. It was definitely a very, very exciting period.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you got to meet so many different people. I'm sure you also interact with people today from that period. So that's where you got that base from, I think. That's awesome. And what got you started exactly in songwriting? Did you have any original compositions in college, or was this something after?
In college, I actually did do some writing, but I was just so focused on learning the craft of singing that even though for part of my degree, I was actually officially in the composition program, I transferred out of composition into the vocal performance program. Just learning the art of singing overwhelmed me that I put writing aside. And then that part of me woke up with a vengeance after I had been teaching for about 6 years at NYU, and there was a stage where I was, coaching all these singers, and a lot of singers were having great success, and things were good on the outside, but I felt kind of empty because I would feel like I didn't have anything tangible because I hadn't been recording anything. Everything was just kind of ephemeral. I had clients that I'd teach or I would perform myself, and everything would just kind of fade into the ether of the gig world. So I decided, you know what, I need to make something tangible. So I really got to learn GarageBand because that was the easiest DAW to learn. And I started producing some projects for some friends. And then that morphed into learning Logic Pro. And, Logic Pro is really GarageBand with a bunch more bells and whistles. I started watching a ton of YouTube tutorial videos and reading a bunch of books like Mixing Secrets for the Small Studio. And then in 2012, I finally produced my first EP. It was completely done on a laptop on Logic. Played all the instruments, mixed it all myself with all stock plugins. It was a great experience. That kind of started the trajectory of producing my own records.
That's awesome. What are some projects you'd like to see yourself do in the future?
I always swing back and forth between doing things that are very produced and doing things that are much more stripped down and don't require much production, don't have many tracks. So I think something that's coming up is probably something more stripped down. Because the last project I put out, it's a song called Liberated, has about 100 different tracks, laid on top of each other, crazy vocal stacks. And the project before that was something called Vocal Artist House, which was a project where I invited singers over to my apartment, and we just recorded things live, just vocal and piano, no overdubs, no edits, and we did the video and the audio simultaneously, and I put that out. And, that was refreshing because it was an exercise in minimalism. So I think things are going to swing back in that direction after Liberated. I might want to try to do something that's simple again.
That's awesome. That's great. So with this pandemic, how has that shifted the way you work, or has it done anything at all, really?
If you can learn how to record yourself and learn your DAW, digital audio workstation, like GarageBand or Logic, you can be pretty self-sufficient and still put out music, in spite of the pandemic. One of the big differences is that you can't get in the same room and make music with people. So a lot more remote music making is kind of what's going on right now. So I'd make like a demo, send the guide track to a guitar player who may or may not live in New York City, or a bass player who may or may not live in New York City, and then we just send files back and forth. So it's a lot more cloud-based music making, which has its pros and cons. I mean, you don't get the same energy that you do when you track live all together, but I do feel like more music making, regardless of the pandemic, is moving in the direction of collaborating beyond borders and sending files back and forth. More music is going to be made that way, especially now with the pandemic forcing people to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And I guess it'll be done in the future too, way later after this pandemic is over, which I hope is soon. I still like to perform, being a classical musician myself. I like to play in a group. We could do all these virtual things, but not everyone has that breadth of knowledge, with recording and things like that.
Yeah, things will swing back, though. I feel like there'll be a correction, and people will crave the in the flesh contact again, for sure.
Exactly, yeah, and especially with Broadway being closed, people were not happy about that. So I think once we get the green light, I think things are gonna just go back to hopefully things the way things are. It's just vocal do. It tends to be a little bit more difficult in terms of containing a virus or something like that, but I'm sure there'll be someone to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, like with the vocal thing, I'm not taking any clients in person, even though New York has moved to stage 3, because I'm in an enclosed space. People are breathing heavily when they sing. It's just, and you can't really sing with a mask on. It just doesn't make sense. Right. So sessions run remotely, but we have to adapt, and we just gotta roll with it.
Absolutely. Great speaking with you, by the way. I really enjoyed this whole conversation. And are there any last words that you would have of wisdom for aspiring artists?
So I would say, if you're an aspiring artist, especially today in this social media age, don't get caught up in the numbers and feeling that your self-worth is tied up with how many likes or subscribers or streams that you get. It's so easy to compare yourself and kind of lose sight of the fact that the point is to share music that's authentic. So I think if you focus on that, you have a better chance of making something that's durable and that could stand the test of time, that you'll be proud of. If you're just chasing the numbers, you end up running the risk of leaving behind this digital trail of subpar projects that you're doing just to get attention. So I would say separate yourself from all those algorithms and focus on the music. But it's a balance, because at the same time you do have to put your foot forward and share the work, because there's artists that go the opposite direction and they're so focused on the music, and say they spend $10,000 to produce an EP, and then by the time it's time to release it, they have no money left to market it. They don't want to market it. They don't want to do anything besides just putting it out into the world. And it takes more than that. So there's a balance there that you can strike.
Absolutely. I do definitely agree that it's more about value than volume. And with things like Instagram, you could always splice up or get creative, but still contain that level of sophistication. And I think that's really important. There's so many people just blasting things out there, and eventually people will get tired of having the same thing over and over again, and content is important, good content, and if it takes more time to do it, then so be it. Again, with budget and everything, you have to be mindful, I think, of all of those aspects. Now that we're in a digital age, we have to be careful with how we move forward and how we put our time into things.
And I also think it depends on your personality too, because there are some people whose personality actually lends itself to just pumping things out every day, and
right.
And there's other personalities that are more, I guess, introverted, where it makes more sense to put something of high quality out periodically. They don't have the right kind of personality to be in front of the camera on TikTok and Instagram multiple times a week.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it was really a pleasure speaking with you, Jerry. And where can people find your information? I know you have your own personal website. You have a Spotify. It'd be great to just get those all here. And
yeah, definitely. So my website is jerrygene.com. And my studio website is vocalartisthouse.com. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Jerry Gene Music. And you can find my songs on my Spotify page and my YouTube channel. Just search under Jerry Gene.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jerry, for your time. And it was really a pleasure getting to know you more.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure.